Okay, today I have with me JanBringman, who is the Manager of Key and Access Services at the University of Iowa. Thanks for agreeing to the interview today. Jan, can you tell me a little bit more about your role there at the University of Iowa?
Sure. The Key and Access Services just recently transitioned from facilities management oversight to the Department of Public Safety, which is the university's police department. And I run the locksmiths, the access control platforms, the camera systems platforms, and the intrusion platforms for the police department now.
That's great. So sounds like you have a wide range of responsibilities underneath you, and physical access control being sort of the main. Can you tell me about your physical access control journey, where you were, what you're doing now, and let's kind of land on where you are currently.
Sure. Back in 2008, when I started at the University of Iowa, there was an initiative or a strategic plan that had been written, and I was hired because of that strategic plan, and it was mostly geared around funding and progressing off of a legacy system called Millennium and migrating to a newer system because a lot of things had been identified by a governance group and consultants as to the lack of security and other flexibility that the legacy system had. And so they hired consultants and they did a strategic plan and they hired someone to guide that plan. And that was me. When I came in 2008, there was probably, 2,000-3,000 readers in Millennium, and there was probably 2,000 or 3,000 readers in what we are now migrating to, which is AMAG. So through the years and the funding, it's taken me 12 years. We are finally now just migrating off of the old Millennium system and converting to AMAG. We'll probably close to 4,000 or 5,000 readers by the time that we got rid of a lot of Millennium that really was just for convenience on interior doors.
And what was the technology behind Millennium?
The technology, Millennium's a unique system, but it utilized the same card reader and card reader format as the AMAG system because through the years, the goal here at the University of Iowa has always been one credential. And so through the readers and conversion, my shop has always maintained that we can use the same card in both systems. The only difference that a card holder would notice, they wouldn't notice anything except for there's no door alarms on the Millennium system. It was just more like a hotel lock. There were no security management system features involved, no door position switches, no latch bolt monitors, no request to exit, and no alarms reporting anywhere. It was basically for plastic keys, and it was put everywhere that a customer wanted it by an outside vendor. So there was no design and there was nothing, no standard or specification outlined. We, over the last 12 years, have put design standards in place that are based off of best practices to elevate the security features of the security management system we use now, basically geared around threat level management for the police department to operate, basically so that we have alarms and reporting that aid us in protecting the perimeter of the buildings and any research or higher security level interior doors. We have a lot of labs and research areas, and we'd had a a few incidences at the University of Iowa that has compelled us over the years. We've actually lived through active shooters on campus, which has resulted in death. We've actually had Animal Liberation Front break into our lab research areas and release research animals. So we've had quite a few compelling events that, you know, made us realize, or made the university realize, that they needed to start thinking about security in a different manner than the way they had. And over the years, we keep driving that to leadership, that it's not if something's going to happen, it's when. They soon forget they've had compelling events, so we remind them, you know, often it's our job to bring that to leadership's attention so they can make the decisions on the risk management that they need to, on where they're going to spend their funding. Most of all of the departments that are like mine are struggling with where their funding is coming from, and who funds them, how they are funded. Once we realized that there was a better way to do that, things have really gotten easier for the University of Iowa to improve the security overall on the academic side of the campus.
Great. So you said you had the Millennium system and you moved to AMAG, and is that the readers themselves?
Oh, I'm sorry. The Millennium's the Millennium is the platform, so that's the network controller and the software. HID are our readers. We did a conversion. If you want to go way back, Millennium used to be referred to as something called Marlock, which was an actual smart brass key that went into a keyhole that was an access control credential. So that's how, when I first came in 2008, there were still some of those on campus. I effectively removed them and replaced them. There were swipe readers on campus. But, you know, magnetic swipe readers. One of the first things we did was get rid of all of those and upgrade. When I came to the university, I realized they did not have a migration path for reader technology. So I had to rewrite the standard and put in the reader that we use now so that I could clearly migrate out of PROC. So all of Millennium and all of AMAG went to the HIDSE reader so that I could migrate us off of proximity someday to a more secure format.
So I want to dig into that a little bit more, because you mentioned best practices and bringing up a migration path. I want you to expand on that, what that is. How a university would benefit from having a migration path.
One of the first things is, if it's not planned for your reader technology to handle a different card format, it's quite costly and labor intensive to plan to get your readers to the correct technology. For us, because I caught it early, I had already changed the reader specification in our design and construction manuals. They were only allowed to install on new projects but I didn't catch them all. There were 1,600 card readers on campus that were not available to read both procs and a new secure format. So in order to migrate from one card format to another, the reader at some time needs to handle both, otherwise you're going to do a complete rip and tear and recard. And that we're a little large for that. I think we have 70,000 card holders on campus. That doesn't include the visitor databases. When you think about universities, one of the things they don't think about is how many copier people and cleaning people, compressed air people are coming onto campus that aren't credential holders, and how they're getting in with authorized access. So when you look at that big picture, we're in, you know, close to 80 or 90,000 credentials in the system that we are looking to migrate away from. So the plan was to change out, first step, 1,600 card readers that would read dual technology cards, continue on with our procs. Our idea was to make it seamless to the card holder so that they wouldn't know that there was any difference. So when we changed out the card readers, then we worked with the card office and a group of governing leadership through ITS and our directory and authentication folks and a couple of other stakeholders within the university to plan out the then card migration and ordering the new cards by department and by security level threats, the high risk users. And as we go, once we've gotten the population recarded, like for instance, the dormitories, those card readers are now flashed to only accept our new secure card format. They no longer read procs. That effect keeps our dorms much more secure. The reason is proximity is seen in our eyes as something that's not as secure format as we'd like.
So okay, so going from procs to, and what's the current credential that you're using?
We decided, and we had to look at a lot of credentials and for a lot of reasons, and we landed on something that's a little bit unconventional for a migration path, but that's EV1 DesFire. The reason that we had to do that is because the University of Iowa decided that it was going to still continue on with one card, but we also have a hospital side to our university. I am only in charge of the academic side, and the hospital access control is a separate system with separate technology. And it was deemed that we should use one card for both systems and make the migration to secure the hospital as well from the old proximity credentials. In order to handle, they had some thousands of what's called fast pass readers that had a technology that was not able to go to COS or SE. They couldn't read it. That changed our card format to, we did through testing and test bench through my office, that these readers changed everything because it was so costly for them to change out the fast pass readers. If you think when you go to the hospital and every computer a nurse gets on to pull up your records, she's presenting a credential to that computer. That's what we're talking about at our large hospital. So that changed. Yeah.
I was just saying, so the hospital in some ways was a driver for what credential technology.
For the card technology, that's correct.
Yeah.
And it was only because of, we had to look at what they had in order to make the swiftest and the most cost efficient way to upgrade the credentials. That's how it drove it. And we're talking, it took a year for this committee to get through that. And with a lot of support from our vendors, our our manufacturers, and it was not made lightly. It was not. There was a lot of testing that went through because we were sure of everything that we made a recommendation to our leadership on.
So let's backtrack, because now that you've painted a little bit of a picture of the migration from procs to DesFire, what did you see as the limitations of procs, and then what do you see as the limitations of DesFire even at this point?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a limitation of procs. There's definitely a convenience factor with procs. The read range is better. It is not secure as far as the technology in the world now has advanced to the stages where the information and the way that communicates with the system, it's at risk of being converted in a way that makes the university less secure. So EV1, it's much more difficult for that, and at this point, not capable. At some point, we'll be migrating again down the line. It's something that you need to do and you need to plan on every 5 to 10 years, because good guy technology advances, so does bad guy technology.
That's a great quote. That's such a great quote. As good guy technology advances, bad guy technology advances. That's good.
So you must plan for it, yes.
Okay, so now that you have Deskfire, how has that changed your perspective on your security posture?
I feel a lot better about my security. I sleep better at night. The reason is when we realized that Prox was at risk, it was something that we knew that was a possibility somewhere down the line, and there was a compelling event that happened that we had a personnel issue in a secure ITS facility of someone that was making comments that he could appropriate the information on a Prox credential. And I asked if it was true, if he had done it, and no one could answer me. So I tasked my staff, my technical staff, to see if they could. If he could do it, we can do it. And within a day and a half, we had done it for $21. So what happened after that is we notified the institution and the police department what happened. In order to, you realize, then we're realizing we need to do this because we're aware of it. After we received permission to spend the money to migrate and upgrade the security systems and the credentials, we happened to encounter an actual cloned credential. And when I realized that credential had been cloned, I turned it over to the police department, and they investigated, and it resulted in 2 individuals' arrests and conviction for cloning those credentials into actually they were into the dormitories. So we feel better now, knowing we've stopped that from happening by doing this migration, and that we're protecting our students and our faculty and staff and our research and our property and our buildings by making this credential. At least we know now that we're more secure from unauthorized access through a locked card reader door.
Now, does the, see how I can formulate this question? As you feel more secure in the technologies that you have, do you see that in the students as well? Do the students, is there any sense that they know it's more secure, or is the goal that they don't and they just live their student lives?
For me, the goal is that they don't. Probably not something that it's difficult to explain to people that are outside the business. As far as the card technologies and what systems do, they know that they want a card to read and let them in where they need to. They understand that they're behind those locked doors for a reason, to keep them safe and to keep unauthorized people from gaining access. I don't think they understand why. When they came, we did our card upgrade to our students at the beginning of the year, so they all come in and they get a new Iowa One card. They didn't know any different. When they got that card, it was already that secure technology. The rest of the campus is going through a recarding, so they know. We were able to give them an online feature in order to make the upgrade with their new Iowa One cards, and that was something our card office did with our directory and authentication group that handles all of our imports and puts the people that are eligible for access through business rules into our system. And then they automatically assign access based on if they have a dorm contract for a certain building. So the student sees nothing of any of what's going on behind the scenes. They just know their card works when they get it. And it gives them access to where they need to go.
So this is kind of a good segue into another series of questions that still focusing on the card and the credentials and the capability of the card itself. We're heading in that direction, but in the process, or when you had your migration path, right, and you're going from Prox to Desfire, who did you have to involve? Who did you collaborate with? Talk a little bit about that process, and maybe were there challenges in that process, any obstacles to migrating to the new technology?
Well, the first level was the police department. They immediately understood the risk. We did a demonstration for our assistant chief using his credential. He immediately understood what the risks were and immediately helped us take action. From then, we involved our card office and our information technology group to sit down and make them understand what was going on. And then we said, we need to do this. We made the proposal that we had to make this migration. At that point, we reached out to HID. We reached out to all stakeholders on campus that were an auxiliary, housing and athletics, and we included all of them in at least monthly meetings, if it wasn't more often than that. And we sat down and we worked through how we were going to do it, and with the idea that we were presenting to central leadership for guidance, approval, and funding.
So was it like a working group of representatives of stakeholding departments or groups, and then you guys kind of met once a week or once a month and got your ducks in a row, and then you present to...
Yeah, we made the proposal in writing in a summary format that was easy to understand for leadership, and then a presentation was made to leadership. After that, it was immediately deemed that we would move forward. The governance took a year. The decision to move forward was almost immediate. Yeah,
and that one of the drivers for that was just circumstances regarding the security of...
At that point, it was the risk, of the technology. We hadn't had the arrests until after we had made that decision. So it really validated what we had done and what we were allowed to prove to do.
So moving. So you made the decision to go with Desfire, and I've got an understanding of the process. What other capabilities besides access control? What does your card do on campus?
Oh golly, it has a banking function. Checking out books. It's identification. This is on the academic side. On the hospital side, I mean, they can charge food, they can charge their books, they can use them in vending machines. They also use them at the hospital, I said FastPass readers, ScrubX machines, their access control system. So there's at least 3 different access control systems that these credentials are going through. My my directory and authentication group could probably tell you exactly how many different card readers there are, because they work with making sure that there's compatibility. There may have been a few that we lost and they had to convert. Time clocks over at the hospital. We lost, we were not able to, they had to change out or upgrade that or use something different. So, but they were a smaller amount, not a big impact on moving forward with the migration of card technology. So they're used for everything, and that's the driving factor for our university, is when your card is tied to your charge, paying your parking tickets and paying for your lunch and doing your banking and charging your books and getting you, your time, getting you in the building, they hold on to that card pretty closely, just like they would their bank card or their credit cards. And that's also used for identification on the hospital side, because that badge has to be hanging on the upper portion of the individual by policy over there.
So you have a card that has printed. Are you still with me?
Yep, I am.
Okay, good. Sorry, I just heard a beep in the background.
Me too.
Yeah. So the one card, the University of Iowa one card, has it has the student's image on it.
Correct.
Right. It has a little bit of information, name, etc. on them, and then does it also have a mag stripe on it as well, or is it really just in? Hang
on. Oh, it does. It still does. Yes, just one. We're down from 2 to 1 now.
I'm sure one of the vendors somewhere has a need for a mag stripe.
Yes.
Probably somebody collecting money too.
I think so.
Okay. So going into student experience, then I imagine that was a big initiative or a requirement for the university to say, our students can't have just multiple things on their lanyard, that they have to use this one for entry and this one for payment, and that was the impetus behind going with the more technologically advanced card. Yeah. So how long have you had the one card initiative in place?
I'm going to say at least 8 years, if not longer. It has always been a goal. It hasn't always been accomplished. I had recently accomplished it, and then we found out that the hospital had gone a different way on several of their projects. And so police respond to both sides, hospital and academic. So after a construction project or a new building at the hospital, we found out that we were adding another credential to what the police were carrying. And that's when we realized that we were no longer a one-card campus. We got to do a better job talking to all the partners about these things.
So it's possible that there's disparate groups on campus who could come up with their own system because they're not speaking with you and bringing you into the process of what their decision making is.
It's definitely a possibility. It's usually more of an offset or a leased building that is the problem, not something that's governed by facilities management when they're doing a remodel or because we do the keying as well. And so by our design standards, it says any new building or any remodel, any access control going forward shall be AMAG and shall be under the direction of the owner, which is awesome. The same with the keying. So that's all big part of what I do is make sure that the standards and the specifications for construction and remodel projects are constantly updated to mitigate any risk of that happening, of anyone coming in. We see it more with intrusion than camera systems. We're just starting to, because we had a policy about cameras, clean that up so that there's no onesie, twosie standalone systems. As we run across standalone systems, then the policy states they shall be, brought into compliance to the managed platform for the university, and or removed. And the same with intrusion. So it was just a matter of getting the funding to get the access control switched over. There had been some things that got in our way of that funding. We probably would have had it done a lot sooner if it wouldn't have been for some unfortunate events that took over the funding. I don't know if you knew, we had a pretty big flood in '08.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
wow.
Really big flood. So, and then we had some pretty big state budget cuts after that. So things like that can happen to, even though there was a plan, the strategic plan said X amount of money a year goes for this directive to upgrade the old legacy system to the new. Things got in the way of that funding. And so we just got it back on track. And by the end of June 2020, I will have everything off of Millennium and on to AMEG.
That's great. So
it was a big thing. 900 readers all in that period of time. That's what I had left, was 900 readers to convert. Wow. Back in September of 2019, I had 901 Millennium readers.
Wow. Okay, so I got two main things I want to talk about, but before I get to those, I'd love to hear your perspective on best practices for migrating to smart card. And what if you were talking to a university, they picked up the phone, they said, Jan, we hear you've got some great processes worked out, you've done this, give me the 5 bullets on best practices, what do I do?
Well, first of all, get every stakeholder that you don't even think about in the beginning to the table and make them understand why and why it's important. Identifying the stakeholders is, in a university or higher ed environment, there are a lot of players that they'll either help you get your goal or they could become an obstacle to your goal. Having them on board in the beginning as part of the process may be slow, may slow your process down, but in the end will make everything go so much easier. The second is, and everyone will tell you, I don't know where I'm getting the funding. Well, the first is, we didn't know where we were going to get the funding either, because we had all the stakeholders together, and that stakeholders group put it in clear and concise, all the risks versus cost for central leadership. When we presented to central leadership, it made sense. I'm going to tell you that having a plan ahead of time and having somebody drive that with your stakeholders group, it was us in the police department, it was Key and Access Services in the police department that drove to that stakeholders meeting, and the stakeholders then took it to central leadership, and central leadership then could clearly make the decisions that they needed to make in order to migrate to a more secure security system for all the faculty, staff, and students.
And then, so that's in the decision-making process. So now that, let's say that they're going to tell you you're funded. Okay, you convinced me, Jan. All right, what do you need? And how are you going to figure out what you need?
For us, I tasked my staff, tell me what's out there. And because we had a hodgepodge of readers out there, we could see how many readers we had in Millennium, but we didn't know the reader types. So at that point, we couldn't guess anymore. We couldn't swag it. What we did was we took, we have a student guard force within the police department, and we paired them with my technicians, and we literally walked every one of the buildings that had questionable readers in it. And we surveyed each and every reader. There were 1,600 of them. That took us 2 months. Then I knew exactly what reader was where and what it was and what it had to be converted to.
Okay, let's pause there just for 1 second, because you said something that I think is very good. Is you capitalized on a student group in order to do some of the legwork for you, so you could more speedily get your inventory of what's sort of in your access control ecosystem.
Right.
Wow.
We had to know what to order to replace it. We knew what we were going to, but we didn't know what type or profile. Was it a mullion reader? Was it, that's what we needed in order to place the order.
Yeah. So you leveraged resources that weren't in your department. That's so great. I love that. That's such a great bullet.
We took them and showed them, if it's this, and then we just made them a checkbox so they could check what reader was at every door. This door, what type of reader? Check what type of reader it was. And so the clip was easy.
So you have this inventory now. So what do you do?
Then I placed the order. I calculated what I was going to need and the types. Once I crunched those surveys and they came back, and I placed the order. Then I knew I had a timeline because of our committee. We knew that we were going to try to have all these card readers changed out by a certain date. And I committed, I think it was within 6 months, to have those 1,600 card readers replaced. So once the order was placed and arrived, we got them in shifts, we got them, and then the vendor stored some for us off-site. My staff and the vendor, we had it listed, you go here, change these readers. They had a list in front of them every day, and someone was dispersing that work and then checking it off as they came back every day. It was 2 months, and we had 1,600 card readers changed out.
Wow! And are you simultaneously reissuing the smart cards?
So the card. What we did was we begged them, change reader first. Let us get them all. First, then you can start carding. That was a key piece. They didn't always agree with that because they wanted to start picking and choosing. And I said, you don't realize what that's going to do to us, the service entity, because we get the calls if something doesn't work. So in order to mitigate a wrong card at a wrong card reader, let us get them all done first. So once that happened, then they had 4 months extra to get their card, and we started with the students, and we're still in the process of carding campus. Okay. It will be over the next, year. So and then we will go back, as we get that cardholder population, carded, and we can see in our databases, we got them all. Maybe there's only 40. We got to contact those 40. Make sure you got your card. Good. Then my staff goes around and we flash the technology in the card reader to no longer read the procs.
Great. I think that kind of covers it, don't you? Anything else you want to add to sort of best practice / process?
No, I think that's probably pretty much what I tell everybody that
Okay, next set of questions, or at least opening up to questions, is where does mobile fit into your access control task?
It's not that we're not aware of it. It's not that we haven't researched it. And it's not that we don't believe that someday everybody's going there. We are not, based on the initiatives that we have going on right now. You have to remember we're driven by leadership of the university for the one card for a lot of different reasons. We couldn't have made that technology jump to mobile. We looked at it, and with the staff I have available, there's myself and I have two engineer programming types. That there's only three of us that do the planning and understand the research and the technology for the whole university. And then I have a handful of technicians that work for me. At that time, that was too much for us, too big a bite to take. And it is too important for the visual credentials in other areas. So we picked a battle that we could win. And I think it would be part of something that we're going to plan for in one of the future upgrades. We know full well that it's going that way. It's just not in this technology upgrade. I can't tell you if it's in 5 or 10 for us. But I can tell you that we're constantly looking at where we're going so we're prepared when we get there to make those technology upgrades. So once we get through this card upgrade, we're going to be looking at where do we go after this and what's the next one. We made sure that in our readers and things that we can do it when we want to, whether or not we do Bluetooth or what. So
you're putting the technology infrastructure in place so that when you do go to mobile, that you're at least out in the ecosystem, you're ready for it.
Yes.
I really like something you said, and I think this would be a helpful thing. I hope we use it in the paper. But you said we picked a battle we could win, and I think that's key. What I'm seeing here is that rather than going with mobile, which you probably would have faced even more friction and a longer process of approval, you got approval on something that made the campus more secure.
Right. Because I had that risk, it was important that I rectify that risk as quickly as possible. And when you have all those stakeholders and the card office being one, that was a lot for them. That would be a lot for them to get their head around and their technology to come up to grade. You realize your card offices have, their software, their badging equipment, and they had their own piece of what they had to upgrade in order to handle recarding. It was an easier transition to do from card to card at this time.
Let's go to the near future and the far future. Let's say in the reality that you face, what do you see happening in the next 5 years? And then let's say money is no object. What would you do in the next 5 years?
So people that visit my office see this giant whiteboard that scrambled all over it are ideas and initiatives that I want to do that if money was no object, things that I would fix.
Oh, great.
And so as we go, we feel pretty good about being able to check off things. So it's in front of me and my staff every day, what it is, where we're going, how we want to get there. So after the card upgrade and our conversion from the old legacy system to the new, we have both those initiatives going on at the same time right now, which is a bit of a strain on resources. So the next things that we're going to be doing are going to be, and this will be in the next 5, hopefully sooner than that, upgrading we're upgrading the platform for AMAG so we can go to a web-based platform for obtaining departmental approval for maintaining, card access, so they can reach us without having to email us. We're doing the same with keys, trying to get us out there in modern technology days where we can gain the authorization through a workflow process on a web based client where they can go there and it will route the approvals, and then it will automate the access based on those business rules. I think we're going to continue to shore up our automation processes. Recently, we've done our higher risk access groups for places that you have a hard time, that needs individual access. We're saying that at least they are being brought into the system and they're being deprovisioned. So we're provisioning and deprovisioning people through whether or not they're eligible based on their HR profile, so that they can no longer access places after they lose their status within the university as employed, or their student status. One of the things that's difficult for us is identifying those transfers that are still employed. So we're working right now with our ITS groups to identify transfers, and taking away and assigning access based on the transfers. As we automate more and more access codes by business rules, that becomes more and more possible. Getting our websites up and our key systems up to being able to have people where we're confident in the authorization that comes. So we're going to get away from decentralized management of assigning access and the access control, and becoming less dependent on individual software users out there in the department. That's my big thing. I think in the long term, I think we'll always be looking at the business rules and how it is that we're authorizing. We're going to always have software users. They're not going to be totally automated, but being able to govern that and making sure that the integrity of how those software users are assigning access is particularly important to us.
So you see in the future taking some of the human involvement out of the issuance process?
Not all of it, but some of it, yes.
Some of it, yeah.
For the part that makes mistakes, I want to mitigate that. You get software users that don't operate the system very often, so they become a risk to us because they forget and would take risks. We like to make it as seamless as possible, but we are not. Can Access is not willing to give up that who's the authorizer piece. Too much business rules is a bad thing. Not enough business rules is a bad thing. So we're trying to stay in the, making sure that we're getting the proper authorization when we're assigning access. The next thing I want to do is I want to schedule. I want to automate some scheduling features. There's not very many folks right now that are doing that, because it takes an integration with the general assignment classroom software. So ours is Astra or Ad Astra. I want to integrate AMAG with the classroom scheduling software so that I can lock and unlock classroom doors based on when that classroom is scheduled and take my operators out of that piece.
That's come up a couple of times in these interviews, is having that integrated.
Well, Kentucky and I talked about it in Penn State. Penn State and I were racing to get it. I don't know if I'll get it before them. We're not competitive or anything, but it's a need. It's a big need.
Does that essentially mean that a student's credential only works within the hours he's been given access to that that
It
building,
could mean that
that
that's,
room based on their schedule, their class schedule?
well, what I'm talking about isn't assigning access, and time codes are part of an access granted on a cardholder's record. What I'm talking about is physically locking and unlocking doors, which is an auxiliary output function of an access control system. Anything you can do on a card with the time code, that's already being done. We're doing that to death, and we're going to keep doing more of that. That's where the future of this is going. Getting the classrooms to lock, or doors to lock and unlock, based on automation is a bit more of a struggle for us. We just haven't had the time to work on it. It'd be my goal. I'm told it can be done, but it'll take another big governance to do it. So I hope that one I can get it done in less than 5.
So what do you think, what do you see as the future of physical access control? And I don't mean on your campus, I just mean in general. Is there a technology that's coming? Is there something that you want, that you wish existed that doesn't? I mean, you live and breathe this every day, and I'm sure there's things that you wish could happen, but you haven't seen it yet. Give me what's in your head about that.
Well, along the integration side is those that do it at any large scale enterprise level. There are some systems that work well with integrating alarms or cameras on the platform, and some that don't. We choose to operate on separate platforms for intrusion, for camera, for access, because each system should do what it's supposed to do. But we integrate them at another level. The future is going to be a software that overlays all the different systems, where you can see everything and operate it from one level by permissions, and still be able to partition it. That's, before I converted or knew I was going to convert the Millennium, that was a bigger priority for me. And it's also for any of your ITS departments that are integrating. Everyone's built their own interface or their own web pages that are dumping SQL data into report functions. And, we do a lot of that. So select people that are chosen to be able to see that information we have separate reporting websites that we can see that we would keep restricted from others. But in order to bring in all systems under one, I would see that I know that the larger institutions in higher ed are operating on multiple systems, and they're having a hard time to get to one without spending a ton of money and 5 years in planning to get there. And you know who they are as well as I do, that they're doing the rip and tear to get to one system. That's a big project instead of doing the conversion. So if they had an overlay to do that, that would give them some breathing room to make their process. I think that's going to come along within the next 5 to 10 to help out. There are a lot of folks that say they do it. I think there's vendors and whatnot. I think it's making it enough where it's user friendly and trusted to the security professionals.
So it's something that exists. It's just not a lot of people are using it because the confidence level isn't there.
Too soon yet.
Yeah, yes. I've seen a lot of that too. Is let's wait and see how some technologies pan out before we make the jump.
Security folks aren't a real trusting group.
Well, it's like you want to have the latest technology. You don't want to be the first person that implements it.
Bingo.
You want to see somebody else struggle through any of the growing pains for you.
Yeah, and that's why doing what you do is so important. We want to learn from each other, and we go to groups and meetings, and we ask for benchmarking, and we ask for, in surveys, because we want to get an idea before we step off that cliff what we're headed for.
Mm-hmm. If and this will be the last question because we're already over by 6 minutes here, but where does mobile fit in your 5-10 year timeline? And I'll piggyback the question on that. Is it something that your students expect at some point?
I am unaware of it being a factor for recruiting, or I'm not getting a lot of push from student driven entities on campus. We just all accept that it's going that way. We just have to best plan for how it is. I mean, there's, besides mobile credentials, we're still not buying into wireless locks. We're still doing business analytics and rules driving, business rules driving access. Until higher ed gets the more specialized teams and the personnel on board to totally understand what it takes to drive this, I think the biggest factor is I have a team that is talented enough that they could handle doing the work and identifying the research in order to guide us and to help the stakeholders understand it. That's a key piece for any university to understand. Having the technically advanced specialized team in the right place is probably why we're successful at getting these large security improvements approved.
You've been successful at educating yourself, rolling out that education to stakeholders, and then stakeholder critical mass convinces the senior admins, so to speak.
That's fantastic. Yes. Thank you for doing that.
Synthesizing that down. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've done
thank
one
you.
good thing for the day. Yeah.
You've done a lot of good things. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Good. Well, I'm going to hit stop recording.